Hello everyone. I am Dr. Suseng Fagogoi, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, North Lakhimpur College Autonomous. Welcome you all to another episode in your favorite channel, e-Politica. So this is module number 11. The topic of today's discussion is challenge to bipolarity, non-alignment movement, and new international economic order. So in this module, we would mainly talk about what are the challenges in front of the bipolarity that was created due to the Cold War, and what initiatives have been taken internationally to challenge the bipolarity. This is in continuation with the previous modules on Cold War, and this module is also prepared for higher secondary class 12 students in political science, Unit 1, Contemporary World Politics. The objective of this module is to estimate the challenges in front of bipolarity, to discuss the meaning of non-alignment movement, to find out why NUM was created, to understand the meaning of new international economic order, to discuss the challenges created by these initiatives in order to control the bipolar politics during Cold War. Let us begin. Now, as my students are already known what happened after the Second World War, I told you that after the Second World War, the world was largely divided into two blocks, two camps, or you can call it as two pools. In these two camps or pools, one camp was led by United States of America with a philosophy of capitalism, whereas another block was led by USSR with the philosophy of communism or socialism. So the entire world after the Second World War was divided into two broad categories of pools. Interestingly, most of the countries in the Europe, whether it is Eastern Europe or Western Europe, got aligned towards either of these pools. With those developments, there was another development that was also noticed in the history of international politics. We saw that in the continents of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, there are certain newly independent countries emerged. Those countries were earlier under the control of certain colonies. They have liberated from the colonial masters and emerged as a newly independent nations. Just because they have liberated from the colonial masters, these countries do not afford or cannot afford to align with any of the blocs because of the economic concerns, the security concerns, and the sovereignty of these nations. So what they have done, they have decided to align together into a new group challenging the existing order. Therefore, there are two major challenges which was emerged after the Second World War and in the beginning of Cold War was where the non-alignment movements. From here onwards, we will consider this non-alignment movement in short as NAM, NAM. And the second one was New International Economic Order. Subsequently, we will call it as NEO, NIEO, NEO. Now, let us talk about what is this NAM is all about. Now, when we talk about NAM, the roots of NAM, it goes back to three leaders. The first one was the president of Yugoslavia. His name was Joseph Broz Tito. The then India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. The president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser. They have met in a city of Indonesia called Bandung in the year 1955 to conduct a conference. The name of the conference was Asian African Conference. So what was the name of the conference? The name of the conference was Asian African Conference. So in that conference, these leaders had came into a consensus for creating a separate space for these newly independent countries so that their sovereignty and their economic independence could be fulfilled under this power dynamics that is going on between USA and USSR. Later in 1956, based on the principles of that conference, The organization called Non-Alignment Movement was formed in Brijuni Island of Yugoslavia by signing a declaration of Brijuni. So that declaration of Brijuni was signed in the year 19 July 1956, which contributed for the creation of a separate political space called Non-Alignment Movement. These three leaders were strongly supported by another two prominent leaders of these countries, the Indonesian President Sukarno and the President of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. So these two, and along with the other three, were together called as the pioneer of non-alignment movement campaign. So they were the founder of non-alignment movement. Let me introduce my students to familiarize them. My students familiarize them with the leaders. From the left, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Sukarno, and Joseph Broz Tito. So these were the five leaders who were, taken the responsibility to create a separate political space for this newly emerged country of Third World. Okay, now let us talk about the causes of the growth of NAM. Now, what were the causes that contributed for the growth of NAM? So, by and large, there were several causes that contributed for the growth of NAM. But being a student of higher secondary classes, that is for 12, I would mostly, emphasize on three causes which were considered to be more prominent for the creation of NAM. The first one was poor economic condition of Asia and African countries. Now, as you all know, the countries of Asia and Africa, who have just liberated from the yoke of colonial masters, their economic condition was very poor, indeed very fragile. So due to their poor economic condition, this country cannot afford to align with only one bloc or only with one pole for the future prospect, because they knew that if they do not align with any of the blocks, they would be able to make bargaining with both of the blocks for the economic benefit of their own countries. So that is the one reason why this country cannot afford for aligning with any of the blocks of Cold War. The second cause was nationalism. Now, as you all know, that most of the countries of the Third World, mostly from Latin America, Asia, and Africa, they have got their independence by the means of a nationalistic movement. For example, you can talk about India also, that in India we have noticed that there was a freedom fight made by the Indian people in the name of Indian nationalism. So therefore, nationalism contributed in a large scale for making these people combining into one fold, because they have similar history. So that similar history of nationalism contributed for the growth of an uniform body called non-alignment movement against the internationalism that is going on. The third cause which contributed for the growth of NAM was anti-colonial policy. Now, as you all know, that these countries were earlier under the colonial rule, therefore they were quite dissatisfied with the character of the colonial leaders, or you can call it as the capitalist, the leaders. Therefore, that anti-colonial policy have contributed a political psyche in the minds of the leaders of these countries, that they will not going to allow any country to establish another colony over them, directly or indirectly. So these are the reasons, why this country went for creating a separate alternative political space called non-alignment movement. Now let us highlight about the first NAM summit. Now the first non-aligned summit that was held in Belgrade in the year 1961, which was attended by 25 member states. The summit mainly focused on three aspects. Number one, cooperation among these five countries. These five countries were the five leaders of NAM and the country they have represented. The second one is growing Cold War tensions and its widening areas. As you all know that at the beginning of Cold War, the countries were put under serious surveillance due to the widening of the areas of conflict by USA and USSR, and they try to enhance their sphere of influence in almost all the countries of the world. They have already divided Europe. The one part of the Europe was following the capitalist regime, another part of the Europe was following the communist regime. So they do not want to have it in Asia and Africa or in Latin America. So that is another important focus of this first summit. They don't want to allow the Cold War tension to enter these areas. The third one is the dramatic entry of many newly decolonized African countries into the international arena. So it was noticed that by 1960 there were around 60 new African members in United Nations. So that shows that there are many new countries have emerged, and those countries need to maintain their political sovereignty and independence. So that these are the matters which were discussed in the first NAM summit. Now let me show where the summit meetings that were held year-wise. If you look at into this table, the first summit that was held in the year 1961, and the recent one, the 18th summit of non-aligned movement NAM, have been organized in Baku in 2019, 25th to 26th October. Now, when you look at the growth of NAM as an organization from its beginning of 25 members, and if you look back now, you'll see that the membership of this organization called NAM has been increased rapidly. Multiple members have entered. So in the recent 18th NAM summit, which was held in Azerbaijan, the city called Baku, on 25th and 26th October 2019, a total of 164 delegations from different parts of the world have participated. And the theme of the summit was upholding the Bendang principles to ensure a coherent and adequate response to the challenges of the contemporary world. Now, as you all know, that in the year 1955, the Bendang conference was held, and the principle of the Bendang conference was mostly dependent on the Panchashil principle, as it was propagated by Jawaharlal Nehru, whereby the countries of this NAM, they want to come together for mutual cooperation, mutual trust, respect to sovereignty. Those principles were again given priority for resolving the contemporary problems of the world. So that was the main theme of the summit that was held in the year 2019. Now, when you talk about NAM, there were largely two debates associated with NAM. The first debate was whether to consider NAM as a policy of isolationism or to consider NAM as a policy of neutrality. By and large, both of these debates are quite interesting because in one way or another, we cannot consider NAM purely as a policy of isolationism or as a policy of neutrality. Now, when we talk about NAM as a policy of isolationism, we cannot consider it to be as a medium of isolationism, because when we say isolationism, it simply means to remaining aloof from world affairs. So, if you look at the Cold War history, we notice that the countries during this period, especially those countries who were the members of NAM, they did not remain completely cut off from the political scenarios of the international politics. Although as an organization they did not participate in the power politics that was going on between USA and USSR, but individually they have developed many kind of diplomatic, financial, trade relationship with the countries who were in the bipolar politics. So that's why it cannot be considered as a policy of isolationism. Now, we also cannot consider the policy of NAM as neutrality, because when you say neutrality, by principle, neutrality means to staying out from war or to avoid, accepting any morality of a war, and you cannot accept that war as omnipotent. So that kind of idea was also there. So when you talk about a country's neutrality in the perspective of getting out of war, that was also to be rejected, because we noticed that many of the member countries of NAM individually they have participated in several wars even during the Cold War. Now, for example, if you talk about our country, India, we noticed that although India was one of the most important leaders of NAM, they have been in war-like situation or in war with China and Pakistan several times during the time of Cold War itself. So the question of neutrality therefore enters into two debates. Many people consider it as a policy of by neutrality, these non-aligned countries, they want to maintain a equidistance theoretically, but in practice we notice that the members of non-aligned countries, they actually developed a proximity with the members of these bipolar camps. So therefore, these are the largely debates on NAM. Now let us now talk about the new international economic order. Now, what is this new international economic order? Now, New International Economic Order, in short NEO, it is associated with the member countries of NAM. Now, these countries are also known as the least developed countries, LDCs, because their economy was fragile, the development was very less. These LDCs, they have multiple economic handicaps. For example, there were problems like poverty, unemployment, least economic development, etc. So the major ambitions of these LDCs are therefore to economic upliftment of their nations and to develop the individual's standard of living. So these are the two ambitions of these LDCs, so that they can improve the livelihood of the people and also economically uplift their nations. And to realize these goals, one option that was left to them was to dependent on the capitalist countries or to going back to their colonial masters. But that solution was not been accepted. Then what was the solution? The leaders of these non-aligned countries, especially the country who are least developed, the countries, LDCs, they believe that going back to the colonial masters and relying on the capitalist regime would not help them because of their political history, because they were already being controlled, exploited by the capitalist countries or the colonial countries. So there was no point of going back to them. So they came up with an alternative to this alternative economic arrangement to them. Therefore, they come up with this idea of NEO. So therefore, many people consider NEO as a product of NAM. But even in the first conference of NAM, which was held in Belgrade, economic empowerment was not emphasized much. It was only in the year 1972, under the leadership of United Nations, there was a conference called the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. A conference was held under the banner of UN. They have brought out a report. The title of the report was Towards a New Trade Policy for Development. So that report, called Towards a New Trade Policy for Development, had pioneered for the growth of a separate economic order for these LDCs, these low developed countries, for these economically poor countries. The report proposed a reform of the global trading system. Now, what were the reforms suggested by the report? Number one, to give the LDCs control over their natural resources exploited by the developed Western countries. So this is very important kind of a development. Earlier, prior to this coming up of this new international economic order, the third world countries or these countries, the lower development countries, their economic resources, their natural resources were completely controlled by the Western countries. So therefore, they want to give access of control to these LDCs over their own natural resources. Number two, obtain access to Western markets so that the LDCs could sell their products and therefore make trade more beneficial for the poorer countries. So this is also very important. Earlier, the entire market regime was top down. So that these poor countries are largely dependent on the rich country for purchasing. So there was no export arrangement for these countries. So with this new international economic order, the access was given to this poor country to enter to the global market so that they can also sell their own traditional items. They can sell their own export items so that they can earn money. They can gain more capital. The third suggestion was made was that to reduce the cost of technology from the Western countries. This is very interesting, that although these poor countries were very much rich in their natural resources, but they lack technology. So for the technology, they have to depend largely on the Western countries. And the cost that was involved in utilizing the technology from the Western country was very high. So this report suggested for minimizing the cost or cutting the cost of the technology for the poor country. The fourth, the suggestion that was made was to provide the LDCs with a greater role in international economic institutions. So earlier, most of the international economic institutions, whether it is WTO, GATT or other institutions, those were only dominated by the Western countries. The third world countries or these countries from Latin America, Asia and Africa hardly got an opportunity to raise their claims and concerns financially. So this report had suggested for a separate agenda for this country so that they can also be a member of these international economic forums. Now let us have a quick bird eye on the development of new international economic order. Although we have said that the idea of new international economic order have developed only in 1970s, but initiatives have been made even prior to that. It was noticed that even in during 1950s, there were certain economists of the world who have suggested for a separate economic arrangement for these newly emerged countries. For example, persons like Roll Prebys and other economists, they have suggested for a new international economic order for this newly independent country. But the tradition that was developed by Roll Prebys in the line of dependency theory, it was not stagnant during 1960. So there was nothing much concrete has been achieved during 1960s. But in 1970, the idea of new international economic order had got lots of momentum. After the UN CTAD, which was held in the year 1972, in the year April 1974, in the sixth special session of United Nations General Assembly, UN General Assembly, it has gave importance towards the establishment of NIEO. And for establishment of NIEO, UN General Assembly have given importance to certain ideas like equality, sovereign equality, cooperation and common interests. In the year 1980s and during 1980s, however, the idea of NIEO, it started getting faded. And the reason behind the declining of NIEO was that the powerful country, the developed countries, they came together to make a strong opposition to the idea of new international economic order. And the economically poor countries who were supporting the idea of NIEO, they have got splitted with their own interests, national interests, and they have failed to prove their unity in the face of opposition. So this is the development of NIEO. Now let us look at how these developments, whether it is NAM or NEO, have been able to challenge the bipolarity. How? So that is the question that we need to answer now. Number one, these initiatives were successful because they have united the third world countries under one umbrella, which technically put a barrier in the spread of arena of Cold War. As you all know that after the Second World War, the arena of Cold War was rapidly developing from one country to the another, from one European part, from one Western Europe to Eastern Europe to other parts of the world. It was spreading like anything. But due to this coming up of these initiatives, the spread of Cold War got stopped. So this was the first challenge that was put by these initiatives. Number two was creation of an alternative space in the otherwise rigid bipolarity. Now, as you all know that after the Second World War, the bipolarity was very rigid. There were only two fronts that led the world, that had split the world. The one front was capitalism, another one was communism. So it was very rigid. There was no flexibility of other political or economic ideologies. But with the coming up of NAM and New International Economic Order, it had given us an alternative space to looking at the world politics. That we do not have to accept only capitalism as a mode of the international relations or communism as a mode of international relations. There are actually other way of looking at the international politics. So that was the alternative space given by these initiatives. The third one is giving the Ldcs a chance to bargain with the developed countries. So this is very important. That the entire economic arrangements, political systems, diplomatic relationship was guided by the Western countries, or you can call it largely by the Europe. So for the first time, with the initiatives of NAM and New International Economic Order, these smaller countries like the lower developed countries, they have got an opportunity to make a healthy bargain for the benefits of themselves. So that is another very important ways to put a challenge in front of the bipolarity. The fourth and the most important challenge that was put by these initiatives in front of the bipolarity was the balance of power. Now, in international politics, balance of power is very important. When the world was completely split into two ideologies or into two groups, there was a possibility of a third world war. Now, why do you think that the third world war did not take place? Maybe one of the important reasons could be these initiatives. Because some part of the world have negated or denied the power competition that was going on between US and USSR, that had contributed for stabilizing the process of conflict that was going on among the countries who are in the bipolar politics. So therefore, thanks to these countries, that the competition that was created among these countries had got stopped, and we did not have to face the Third World War. So these are the ways how these initiatives have challenged the bipolarity. So these are the things that we need to talk in this present module. So we have talked about many things. Let us have a very quick recap. We talked about what are the challenges in front of the bipolarity, what is NAM, how NAM was developed, what are the causes of NAM, what are the initiatives taken so far, how NAM has been developed as an organization. Then we talked about what is this new international economic order, why it was been created, how it was been created, and then we talk about how these initiatives have challenges the bipolarity of the Cold War. So I hope our students are able to understand what it was aimed at. You are watching e-Politica, your favorite channel on political science. If you like this video, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. And if you have any questions or doubt, please write to me at gogoi.susang@gmail.com. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Hope the purpose of this module had got fulfilled. We will again meet with another module on political science. Till then, stay safe, stay home.